Are you thinking of moving to Toronto, or as we like to call the Six? Here are 8 things I wish I knew before I made the big move. Hi, if you don't know me, my name is Emmy. I was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan, and I came to Canada 3.5 years ago to study for university, and I will be moving back to Japan very, very soon. Toronto winters are very, very harsh. While in Toronto, we do experience 4 seasons throughout the year. I would most likely describe it as 70% winter and like 30% warm summer times. Peak summer months are probably July and August, but we do start getting cold around October, and it'll be the coldest around January, February. But it is so dry. My knuckles are literally flaking and bleeding from how dry it is. My skin is just flaking, dead skin. I've never had that happen to me before. It can get as cold as to like -10, but sometimes on a rare occasion -20, but you will see negative numbers every day in the winter. And keep in mind that it gets super dark around 4 p.m., especially with daylight savings. That doesn't help. And it's just a very depressing time. I experienced seasonal depression for the first time since moving here, and I really had to adapt to the winters here. It's not for the weak. Apartment hunting in Toronto, especially as a student, is very, very difficult. The market, ever since I moved, has just been increasingly getting worse. Everything is so expensive. An average apartment, I believe, for a 1-bedroom is around $1,500 if I'm not mistaken. Even landlords are experiencing increasing interest rates.
Hi guys, so I'm editing this video right now and I forgot to mention something actually very, very important. But in Toronto, something that I wish I knew was for buildings that were built before November or October of 2018, I will insert the exact date here. The buildings have rent control. So what this means is that any rental buildings or properties that were built before this time have rent control, and therefore your landlord cannot legally increase the rent by a certain percentage. Otherwise, it would be illegal. However, any buildings built after that time period do not have rent control. Therefore, if you are getting a good deal on a building for a certain amount of price for your rent, that's great, but the next year when your lease renews, your landlord could potentially increase the rent by a huge number, and that's like legal. Obviously, there's no security with that, so a lot of people prefer to rent buildings that have rent control so that they have that security, knowing that they would be able to live in that place, being able to afford it. Obviously, before COVID or during COVID, the prices for buildings and rental properties were so cheap. So a lot of people who have been able to obtain that price and continue to live there since that time have continued to pay COVID prices, which is amazing for them. But obviously, newer buildings don't have rent control, so there's not a lot of security there, knowing that the price could increase at any given time. Yeah, that's something I wish I knew before moving here. That's really important to know, actually.
Toronto actually banned foreign purchases of housing, so if you are not Canadian, you are not able to purchase property in Canada because of how expensive it is. As an international student, I had to pay 6 months of rent deposit, so the last 6 months of first year plus 1 month up front. So essentially, I had to pay 7 months of rent up front, and that was obviously not something that me or my roommate wanted to do, but eventually it did have to go to that case because we were apartment hunting for months and we weren't getting anything. A lot of landlords in Toronto do not like to rent to students just because we don't have credit scores, we don't have proof of income, we don't have a guarantor, we don't have anything to sort of create that safety net for them and to make sure that like we're good tenants. So a lot of them require a lot of months rent up front just so they have that safety net. So me and my roommate, we were apartment hunting for months. Honestly, we were jumping from Airbnb to the next just because we couldn't find anything. We would like view an apartment, we would like it, submit a offer, and it would be taken the next day. There's a lot of bidding wars with international students because there are a lot of wealthy Chinese, specifically Chinese international students that don't mind bidding. September is probably the worst time to try to look for an apartment because that is when everyone is moving in and going to find an apartment. Yeah, it's just not a great time. It is very, very expensive, which leads me to my next point, cost of living. Cost of living has exponentially gotten more expensive. Groceries are very, very expensive. Within the last like 3.5 years, it's just so hard to buy groceries. At this point, I feel like it's cheaper to eat out, like get takeout, than like buy my own groceries and cook. cook a meal, which is really unfortunate. And I read somewhere up that an annual salary of 100K is considered to give you a comfortable living in Toronto, which should not be the case. Everyone I've encountered in the city has at least 2 jobs, if not more, and that shouldn't be the norm, I feel. I feel like everyone should be able to sustain themselves with one job, one stable job. But yeah, I'd say the biggest expenses in Toronto are food, utilities, and housing. Employment. For employment, I'm going to be talking based from an international student perspective. As an international student, you are allowed to work part-time versus America where you're not. During school semesters where you are studying, you can work up to 20 hours a week outside of school, so off campus. However, you don't have a limit to how many hours you can work if you are working on campus. But during break, for example, like summer break when you're not studying, you can work full-time. So obviously you need to have both a work permit and a study permit to do that. I'm enrolled in a co-op management program, so it's an integrated internship program in my school that requires you to fulfill internships in order for you to graduate. So that essentially helped me a lot in my journey in finding work. I recommend joining a co-op program if you are thinking of moving to Canada in general to study. It makes the internship seeking process a whole lot easier and simpler, and potentially even easier for you to get a job post-grad if you're looking for one. I know a lot of my friends found their current prospective jobs through their internships that they had while studying. Despite that, I won't deny that the job market is very, very tough in North America right now. If you are looking for a job, Toronto is definitely the spot if you're looking for a 9-to-5 and looking for more opportunities. Versus a city like Vancouver, I think Toronto is the main hub for jobs. Next, public transportation. So we have an area in Toronto called the GTA, called the Greater Toronto Area. So it encompasses different cities within, I guess, Ontario, but GTA is like it's different to Toronto, which is like right here in the Central Hub. Toronto has its own public transit called the TTC. It stands for Toronto Transit Commission. We only have 3 lines on this train. So TTC has trains, streetcars, and buses, but the trains itself only has 3 lines. And coming from Tokyo, that's actually absurd to me. It takes you nowhere, essentially. There's only 3 lines, lines 1, 2, and 3. That's literally what they're called. And that's for trains. A lot of the streetcars right now we're experiencing, like a lot of them have been shut down. Like the 510 is shut down till the end of the year, and that streetcar is super essential. A lot of people are complaining about it. I feel like it's very hard for the TTC to be on time. There's always something going on, out of service, some sort of issue. You get what I mean. We do have a card called a Presto card, which is essentially your public transit card. It's $3.30 for adults and $2.35 for youth and I guess elderly. What I like about the Presto card, when you're using the TTC, you get a free transfer of 2 hours. So what this means is if I tap my card onto a train or a bus or a streetcar, no matter how many times I tap my card, as long as I'm using the TTC, I get free transfer. So I get charged a flat rate of $3.30 versus like when I'm in Japan, I have to tap my Suica when I go in and when I go out. Whereas in Toronto, you just tap when you go in and then you don't need to tap when you go out. The reason why you have to tap in and tap out when you take the transit in Japan is because they calculate based on the distance, what lines you take, etc., and charge you based on that. So the further you go, the more expensive, obviously. But in Toronto, like the further you go, it's not necessarily charging you more as long as you're using that 2-hour free transfer, which is actually really good. We also have a thing called the GO train. So GO stands for Government Ontario. The GO train, and there are also GO buses, but it's a regional public transit system that connects Toronto with other regional areas via trains and buses. Other than the TTC, we do have other public transit systems within the GTA. So for example, if you're in Mississauga, you would see the My Way buses, for example, and there are also like Oakville Transit, Burlington Transit, like each little area has their own little public transit, but for the main part, we do have the TTC that's running in downtown Toronto. Healthcare. So for healthcare, Canada's known to have free healthcare. As an international student, obviously we don't have that, but we do have a thing called UHIP, which is University Health Insurance Plan, versus OHIP, which is for the universal healthcare for Canadians. So UHIP covers basic health, such as doctor visits, hospital stays, medical tests, and emergency services. It doesn't cover everything. So for example, dental care and certain medications, you would have to either pay or look to to another medical insurance plan for that. UHIP is automatic. You don't have to do anything on your end. Your university will provide that for you. Often in an email, you'll get a digital PDF card. Please make sure to do your research before going to a clinic and making an appointment because not every clinic accepts UHIP. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Cultural differences. There are so many versus Japan. One thing I was pretty shocked about was LCBO. I didn't know what LCBO was. Like, the social construct of a liquor store did not exist in my brain because I grew up in Asia. You can literally grab alcohol from a vending machine if you wanted to. 24 hours of the day, you have access to alcohol no matter what. Coming here, LCBO is the liquor store and it opens until around like 9 p.m. usually. But that's like bizarre to me because I didn't know that that was a thing. That's one thing that I was culturally shocked with. And clubbing in Toronto, everyone clubs so early. In Asia, we go to the club at 1 a.m. If you go anytime before 1, it is dead. It is empty. You go to a club at 1 a.m. in Toronto, they're like, no, doors are closed, it's time to go home. They shut down the club at 2 and they stop letting people in around like 1, and that is insane. Like, people go from 1 in Japan, but that's one culture shock that I would say I had, at least from an Asian. Other than that, it is very multicultural. You don't feel like you stand out in a sense where like everyone's staring at you like, oh my god, what, like, why is there an Asian here? There's no feeling like that at all, which I really appreciate because I felt like I just fit right in. In terms of work culture, it is a lot more chill. Obviously depends what company you work for, but in general, work culture in Canada versus Japan is so much more chill, and there's no like stupid hierarchy, like just because you're older than me I have to talk to you in a certain manner, whereas that's like the norm in Japan. Talking to strangers is a lot more easy and not frowned upon. If you talk to strangers in Japan, they would be like, you're weird, like are you mentally okay? Like, why are you talking to me? Talking to strangers is a lot more easy. I feel like I've become more outgoing since moving here, and like wearing whatever I want here, I don't feel like I stand out, and I really appreciate that. Building a social network. Because Toronto is so multicultural, I find that it is fairly easy to find a social network. I find that a lot of people connect through music. So for example, if I'm Asian and I like to rave and I start encountering people in the same community, everyone sort of knows each other. You start to meet people and then meet people and everyone is connected in some form of way. That's how I at least find it to be. There's always like an Afro beats culture where like everyone goes out for like Afro, and like there's also Hispanic nights. There's always some form of event that people go to, and I feel like everyone is connected through music, and that's what I at least found to be in Toronto. So if you wanna meet people, find people, go to events, go out. It doesn't have to be like clubbing. I would refrain from clubbing, to be honest, but more so like social events that bring people together and connect through music. Nevertheless, it is very easy to obviously feel lonely in a city that you just moved to. Loneliness is completely normal, but honestly, building that social network comes with time. Some people get lucky, some people don't, but I'm a firm believer that whatever belongs to me will come to me. So like, you just have that mindset of like, I attract this type of people and good energy, and those right people will come to you. So that comes to the end of my video. If you are thinking of moving to Toronto, I hope this video gives some form of enlightenment. If you took the time to watch this video till the end, please make sure to comment about your experiences of moving out or moving to a different city if you have, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!